This video is sponsored by Raycon. There is imagery in Hellraiser that is scorched so deeply into my skull that it hurts to even think about it. Now, before we open this Pandora's box of traumas, I must confess the last time I actually saw Hellraiser in its entirety was when I was a wee lad watching it late one night on TV despite being forbidden to by my parents, so it's no surprise upon rewatching it for Halloween for the first time in, let's say 15-20 years, that I have misremembered everything that happens. As such, what you're getting from me is more of a raw reaction as I contextualize such diabolical imagery as an adult who puts watching horror movies down as an occupation on his tax returns. If you're a die-hard Hellraiser fan, and I imagine many of you are, you're probably not going to get any new insights from me, seeing as I'm not as engaged with the work of Clive Barker. I have said in the past, it's not that he's bad, it's just that he's not really my style, but I can appreciate the grotesque uniqueness of his creations. It's pretty much like Lovecraft, where I can take him or leave him depending on the premise and what mood I'm in. I'm not usually one for eldritch gods or demonic hellspawn, but I am a man of emotional intimacy, human relatability, and the nuances of the quiet unknown, which, rewatching Hellraiser, to my surprise, is a supremely more fitting description than simply humanoid gremlins with a fetish for pain and pleasure. Despite the pop culture prominence of its iconic Cenobites, Pinhead, Scary Lady, a Slug, and Baby Nemesis, it's remarkable how their appearance in the original takes up barely 10 minutes of runtime, as they show up to bookend the story's enigmatic nature, implying that the harrowing events we agonizingly witnessed were merely an inconsequential, insignificant blot in a long-standing history of unimaginable horrors. I fucking loved this movie, and I wish I rewatched it sooner as an adult as opposed to relying on contextless clips to re-jog my memory. It is artfully clever, ghoulishly nasty, and pleasantly self-aware in taking what is effectively a gritty British kitchen sink drama about a dysfunctional romance and having it be perpetrated by the suffering of a Hieronymus Bosch painting. It is an experience, to say the least. As we go along, please make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below, including what I should cover next, and also a massive shout out to Beth. Happy 32nd birthday from one horror fan to another. I hope you and your husband have a fantastic time at Halloween Horror Nights to celebrate after so many COVID delays. I am supremely fucking jealous. And to everyone else, let's talk about this video sponsor, Raycon. Halloween is finally here, and what better way to soak in the atmosphere than with Raycon earbuds. These bad boys provide me with fantastic comfort and sound quality for either the perfect autumn walk when listening to horror stories on Spotify or watching scary movies on Shudder. With a quick 3-second toggle on the left earbud, I can switch between different sound profiles to adapt to what I'm listening to. Pure sound gives a rich clarity to the tones of any spooky narrator, while balanced sound sustains the mood of any cinematic classic. And lastly, bass sound helps hit those electrifying synthesizer sweet spots when listening to a John Carpenter score. Designed with stable in-ear fit thanks to different gel tips, not only will Raycon earbuds remain peacefully in place whatever position you're in, but they help alleviate the irritation when listening for extended periods of time. Heck, if you need to reconnect with the world around you, Raycons allow you to switch from noise isolation to awareness mode at any time with a simple press and hold of the right earbud, creating a seamless, hassle-free experience so you never have to fully disengage from the spooky sounds within. Raycons come packed in a stylish charging case of your colourful choosing to provide 8 hours of playtime and a 32-hour battery life. And best of all, you get the same premium quality and high performance features of other earbuds, but at half the price. That's the real scary deal of this Halloween. Raycons have never looked, felt, or sounded better than before, so head on over to buyraycon.com/Ryan to get 15% off your Raycon purchase, and let me know what you think. Hellraiser tells the story of the Cotton family as they move into a rugged home once occupied by the husband Larry's missing brother Frank, who unbeknownst to them was tortured and executed by mysterious interdimensional creatures known as Xenobites, who seemingly took his soul to their version of heaven or hell depending on who you ask. However, Frank is soon resurrected by Larry's blood following a random accident, leading to Larry's second wife Julia assisting Frank in his devilish bid to rejuvenate his body and soul so they can continue an affair they had when Frank was still alive. For the most part, it's a pretty simple story about a fractured family of individuals unsatisfied with the lives they have, while blatantly exploring the threshold between both the extremities of pain and pleasure, that is, the gratification Frank and subsequently the Xenobites get from inflicting such suffering. As a quick tangent, for its time, Hellraiser was dealing with what society considered extremely taboo subject matter. In Britain in particular, horror had a fierce reputation for being so transgressive that violent movies, then considered video nasties, started getting banned or facing aggressive censorship for supposedly violating the Obscene Publications Act of 1959. As such, the British discourse towards violence and its stigmatized and ignorant association with what traditional conservative Britain considered deviant behaviour in the wake of a rebellious cultural objection stemming from the mid-70s made Hellraiser the punk rock of British horror movies. There's a kind of cultural dissonance within Hellraiser where, outside the horror, it's stylized like most working to middle class dramas about life in a tense Thatcher Britain, but then it proceeds to override that traditionalism with visually eccentric absurdities and gory goodness that I think defied and even mocked the attitudes of the time. Now, where my interpretation gets a little complicated is when we take into account that, according to an interview with Clive Barker, the producers apparently pressured him to Americanize the story, despite it being inherently English and personal. This was likely an effort to make the film more appealing to the US market, where the film made the biggest impact, and the fact that Barker was also an inexperienced director, making producers weary of its commercial capabilities. But that defiant, cheeky British identity is still firmly in there to give it a real sense of place and time. What we're essentially watching is the breakaway from traditional normative values to expose the inner deviance of ordinary people. In other words, what we have is this outwardly traditional average family, turbulent but picturesque, where behind closed doors they defy the morals and values expected of them. The most crucial and arguably complex character of the story is Julia, who agrees to seduce men and bring them back to the house, where they're violently subdued and later murdered in order for Frank to consume their souls so he can regenerate. That's basically the gist of the plotline. Frank comes back to life and tempts Julia with the power of further sexual shenanigans, which for her reinvigorates the missing romantic spark that was severely missing in her desperate marriage with poor, naive Larry. In fact, there's a HMV article I came across saying that while working under the unsubtle but direct title Sadomasochists from Beyond the Grave, one of Barker's female crew humorously suggested calling the film What a Woman Will Do for a Good Fuck, which itself is just as effective in summarizing the film, particularly when Barker called Hellraiser a story about good and evil in which sexuality was the connective tissue. What's interesting about the dynamic in Julia's relationship with Frank is that it's clearly selfish from both ends, and that's besides the fact that they're both betraying poor old Larry, who just wants everyone to be happy. For Julia, her love for Frank seems genuine. At first, she tries to resist her urges because maybe she can still find love in her marriage, but seeing Frank return gives off this visually dazzling appearance like a tortured fairy tale. You could say he's her forbidden happily ever after. She indirectly lusts for punishment by indulging in infidelity with a stronger, attractive, confident, and more commanding version of her husband. It draws a line between dreamscape and reality, where love makes her blind to the figurative and literal ugliness of everything around her, like a princess finding true love in that vomiting frog from The Simpsons.
Please kill me.
Prior to her re-engagement with Frank, we get a real sense of the longing, unfulfillment, and utter forlorn in both her, Larry, and their daughter Kirsty's lives. It comes across vividly in the home setting. It's a cramped, isolated, stuffy environment that somehow makes them feel emotionally further and further apart from each other. You know that phrase, love conquers all, right? Well, imagine that, except love is poisonous and hurts and slowly kills everything around it. That's basically what we've got here. This isn't love in a sort of big, colourful cartoon heart. No. This is love, but with a putrid organ ripped right out of your fucking chest. When it comes to Frank, the real sadomasochism shows its true colours, as the opening sees him obtain a cryptic puzzle box that, once complete, unlocks a realm of incomprehensible pleasures that defy mere mortal lust and transcend the boundaries of pain to give its subjects the ultimate high. Or at least that's one way to describe it. Despite this simple explanation that it's basically a demonic sadomasochist netherrealm nightclub, it's pretty much ambiguous as to what it actually entails, as its purpose is subjective to the desires of its subjects. In fact, when confronted by Pinhead, he perfectly describes his crew as demons to some, angels to others. They represent the two ultimate polar opposite extremes of the human experience. The complexity of Frank is that he too has become so unfulfilled to the point of becoming completely desensitized to pleasures, and now desperately longs for something unobtainable. However, the minute he finds it, he's practically sold his soul for it. With him, there's a disconnect where he doesn't feel love, his empathy and compassion ceases to exist, and now it seems to be an incessant animalistic need to just fuck and consume anything that moves. He's feeding an addiction, and the emotional endorphins aren't enough to satisfy his deadly, sinful lust, questioning to what extent his motive is worth the suffering. It's incredible how self-contained and precise the whole experience is. I actually think the story being a character study than strictly plot-driven might be more alienating than the gore and violence itself. It's much more about engaging with the fucked up nature of its characters, as opposed to uncovering the mystery of the Cenobites and the puzzle box. Hellraiser has a bit of a reputation for being a body horror splatter flick, but like with Cronenberg and all the other masters of horror, it's psychological to its core. In the spirit of kitchen sink realism, it's about people and their morals in times of hardship. It deals with how the greatest pleasure us creatures can experience can also be the very thing that hurts us. It's something we take for granted, and in Julia and Frank's case, they both take advantage of it for selfish means. Frank wants to bone and ferment in his own perpetual narcissism, while Julia exploits vulnerable men, including her own husband. It sees humans as no better than each other. We're all fallible creatures with the same desire for self-preservation. It's only when we appreciate true, unadulterated empathy are we able to share love for the feeling that it's meant to be. The cynical side of me sees Julia's journey to rekindle love as bringing her nothing but pain by a man who doesn't share the same desire. There's an equilibrium at play between good and evil. For every pleasure received, suffering must be inflicted to compensate for the moral imbalance. That explains the neutrality of the Cenobites as both demons and angels. They are the connecting tissue Barker describes, the bridge between extremes. However, I'm going to climb out my own ass here and stop overthinking every fine detail of the story and get to the ending, so spoilers for the outcome. The climax does a pretty clean job at wrapping up all the madness by having the Cotton's daughter Kirsty return home to discover Frank has done a Dennis Reynolds on Larry by wearing his skin.
This is about the thrill of wearing another man's skin. That's how you get off.
Kirsty essentially plays the dual role of acting as the vessel for the audience and being the obligatory symbolic innocence when the Cenobites and some weird worm thing arrive to reclaim Frank after he escaped their demonic nightclub. Scooby-Doo hijinks ensue before Julia is accidentally killed, and upon ripping apart Frank, Kirsty sends the Cenobites back home using the puzzle box, which is then reclaimed by a demon observing the family this entire time. The box returns to where Frank first obtained obtained it, and the cycle of pain and pleasure continues. Here's the thing, there's part of me that feels the ending is a little anticlimactic, but at the same time, it at least contextualizes what the fuck is actually going on and what the Xenobites essentially are. It depends entirely on how you've enjoyed the journey up to this point. If you aren't invested in the themes and its ugly characters, it's not going to give you anything at the destination. Like I said in the opening, the story is deliberately inconsequential. It's a bottle film about one family's experience with the unknown, with the implication being that there are many more gruesome and unforgiving stories to be told. And that's pretty much my ramblings on Hellraiser. If I've got anything wrong, please let me know about it in the comments below, including your thoughts on the sequels if you've seen them. Thank you so much for watching as always, and until next time, stay safe, stay away from puzzle boxes, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye!